Hi everyone, this is Lauren Hughes, the PBIS coach at Crandall. Welcome back. If you saw my video last week, this is our second week of doing the Pride at Home video series. So these videos are just going to simply be different strategies that we utilize in the school day with the kids throughout the year, and how can we transfer these into your home and make any behavioral difficulties you might be having a little bit more easier to manage. So the focus of this week's video will be on how to set clear behavioral expectations for your child to use at home while they're doing their distance learning or just in general, as well as what is the most effective way of teaching those behaviors to your child. Last week's video was primarily focused on how to set up the environment, as well as providing that acknowledgement to your child when they are showing those appropriate behaviors, as well as some ways to do an error correction when they do end up misbehaving. So if you didn't get a chance to see that last week, then feel free to visit my YouTube channel and you can find it there. When we are teaching any new skill, regardless what it is, it's important to make sure that there are clear expectations of how to get to the desired outcome, as well as explicitly teaching what that looks like and potentially reteaching if it's a difficult skill. And there might need some prompting and other things along the way to make sure that you can generalize that skill across many settings. So for most of us, we're really good at teaching academic skills and new hobbies or how to play a sport. We're really good at explicitly going through the different steps and what exactly that looks like and how to do it the best of your abilities. But for some reason, there's this misconception that kids are just supposed to know how to behave, and that by watching us or just being in this world that they're just supposed to know how to behave. And that's not always the case. Kids really do need to be explicitly taught how to behave, just like if you were teaching them how to do an addition problem or how to kick a soccer ball. So it's best practice that when you are teaching a new social skill or a new behavior that is an expectation of yours, you should go through these 5 steps. Define, teach, prompt, monitor, and evaluate. So the reason for why this is a cyclical visual that I put up here is because it's really not a one and done event that you just miraculously teach your kid how you want them to behave when you're playing games with each other or during homework time, and then all of a sudden they're never going to misbehave again. That's wishful thinking, but unfortunately that may not be the case. So what I mean is that even though you've gone through these steps, given the prompts and all of that, they might still misbehave and they might have difficulties in certain areas. So you might have to go back through this cycle again and go right back to the beginning of defining it again so that you're sure that they know what the expectations are, etc. We're going to get more in depth what those steps look like so that you know what this cycle looks like and how you could repeat it if necessary. So let's just dive right into the steps. Our first step is define. So we really want to be super explicit on what that behavior looks like by defining it for them in very kid-friendly language. At school, we utilize this format called a matrix because it's a really easy visual where you can break down different times of day, different locations around the school in a very similar format that the kids are used to utilizing. So you might have seen this visual posted on Cougar Tales or on the Teams page that your child is utilizing for distance learning. So this is an example of a matrix. This is something that we as a school created to show what we want our kids to be doing every time they log on to Teams. So this is what a matrix would look like, and I'm going to show you some other examples later of what that might look like at home. So obviously, at home, it does not need to be as in-depth or explicit as this. Like I said in the last video, the good thing with this is a lot of these strategies, there's no cookie-cutter one way of doing things because we need to find out what works best for our families, and how in-depth you need to get is really dependent on your child. So the most important thing when you're coming up with these expectations is to make sure that you're wording it in a positively stated way. So we don't want the child to have a list of don't do this, don't do that, no this, no that. Because we all know that kids will keep coming up with different ways to not behave, so you're going to just keep adding to that list forever. So just like when I discussed the error corrections last week, it's the same thing for when we're writing expectations. We really want to just tell them exactly what we want to see them doing and the behaviors that we are looking for, as opposed to just saying everything we don't want them to be doing. The example that I like to use is when I've gone into some public restrooms, they always have signs on the walls or around the toilets that say, "Do not throw paper towels in the toilet." So for me, that thought never even crossed my mind. So it's sometimes I think that when we make lists of things not to do, we might actually be putting some ideas into kids' heads of ways to misbehave, which we never want to give ideas to kids of things that they can do wrong, right? We really just want to be as specific as possible about what we want from them. So this one here is an example of a matrix that's more broken down by time of day and activity that you might be doing. So it has independent work time, online enrichment time, specials, as well as recess. So these are the main points that I think that are happening in your day. So I just added those 4 on here. You can really add whatever you would like to that. So this one's pretty in-depth. Don't feel like you need to do something this intense unless you feel like this would help your kid be most successful. You can really do something much more simple that's just a basic list of rules that you can use throughout the entire day. So this list really is just a quick visual of a set of rules that should kind of be the case for any time during your kid's day. So that could be during their distance learning time, during playtime, whatever that might be. So that might be all you need for your family. But really having a visual is important, and I think the more that you can include your kid in making these rules, because they're pretty honest about what might be difficult for them, and it really will help them buy into it and feel like they're more involved in the process of what is expected of them. So when it comes to teaching those expectations, what we really do at school is we make sure that we're teaching them right in the setting that it's happening. So if we're teaching them how to walk appropriately in the hallway, we wouldn't practice that in the classroom. We want it to really be where it's naturally happening and with the person that's with them during that time. Obviously, I know it looks different at home. You're the one that is constantly with your child, but trying to make it as real time as possible. So if you're going through your team's expectations, if we go back to one of the ones that were on there, one of the examples was to make sure that they go through and look at the different assignments that were posted by their teacher. So they should be scrolling through their team's page and looking to see if there's anything new that they need to look at. So if that was the expectation that you were trying to teach your child, you would actually go into teams with them, show them how to scroll, and then have them practice. This will really just make sure that they actually know how to do it because you've seen them practice. So we all know that a lot of kids like to say, "But I don't know how, I don't remember," things like that. So if you've gone through explicitly and done the steps with them, there's really no wiggle room of whether they've shown that they can demonstrate that skill. So now that we've taught the skill, obviously they might need some prompting. So that's our next step, is to prompt them when necessary. So if you know there's a certain time of day that might be difficult for your child, maybe coming off of the iPad after doing Freckle, you might want to prompt them before they get on and say, make sure that you remember once the timer goes off, we have to be right off of the iPad. Another word for a prompt is a pre-correction, because really, like I was saying before, we want to be as proactive as possible. And if you know that this is either something new that you're teaching them, because again, this whole distance learning is completely new, so obviously the expectations might be very different than when they were normally doing their homework at home. So we want to make sure that in order to not have us react once they do something wrong, we want to just kind of stack that front end and give them the pre-correction and reminder of what the expectation is. So one of my old classrooms had a very difficult time in the hallway. They needed a lot of reteaching. We went through this cycle a lot. So when they were having those difficulties or I knew we were going out into the hallway, I made sure I always did a pre-correct. I sounded like a broken record of telling them hands to our sides, voices off, give 3 squares of space. So that's just an example of how I was making sure that I told them the expectations beforehand so there was no question what it was. And it's really just a quick reminder to keep them on track and hopefully prevent them from going down a negative road. So when you think of monitoring them, this just means you can do some quick check-ins while they're doing their work and just kind of see and make sure that they are showing those behavioral expectations that you have taught them. So you want to make sure that they are being appropriate on their team's page, using kind words, working quietly. So you would just check in and make sure they're doing that, because especially if this is well, this is completely new for everyone, we really want to make sure that we are reinforcing the kids when they are doing the right thing. So this would be that perfect opportunity that by coming over and just giving a check-in and monitoring how they're doing will really be an opportunity for you to positively recognize them when they're doing the right thing. Also, by doing these check-ins and monitoring, you can also see and hopefully catch them before they start misbehaving or getting off track. So it's a really good time for you to just give that quick prompt or that reminder of, hey, remember we have to make sure we're keeping on task and paying attention to my teacher on the screen. So the last step is to evaluate. And at school, normally we would evaluate by utilizing our behavior data, which comes from office write-ups from teachers to see if there are any areas that the kids might be struggling, where they might need some more reteaching, or to go through this cycle again. At home, obviously, we don't have behavior data, so there's more informal ways that we can go about this. So being cooped up with your kids all day, obviously you're going to start noticing trends and times of day when following these behavioral expectations is going to be more difficult. Maybe they have a hard time logging in to Teams and doing the live meetings and paying attention, whatever it might be. So that might be an opportunity for you to do some more reteaching around that, having that conversation of what's difficult about this. Is it because you miss your friends? Do you just feel like you need a break after you do your math work before you log on? So just looking for those trends of times when your child might be having a hard time can give you some pretty good data, and you can kind of make some adjustments from there. So I hope you found this information to be useful. And I really do think that this is a great first step for our first week of full-on virtual learning, because I know before we were really dependent on the packets, and now that we've moved on to the virtual world, it's going to look a lot different for us moving forward for the rest of this distance learning time. Again, thank you so much for taking the time to watch my video. If you have any questions about any of the content today, even if you would like some help creating your own matrix or a simple list of expectations at home, I am always happy to help. I will put my contact information again at the end, so feel free to reach out through email. And I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy, and keep doing your personal best.